Hi everybody. There are 11 key differences between court reporting and cart captioning. That's what we'll talk about today. Even though court reporters and cart providers both provide a record of what is said, there are some key differences between the two branches of stenography. Number 1, interrupting the proceedings. In court reporting, if you don't get something, you have to interrupt the proceedings and ask for clarification. I once sat in a courtroom observing the court reporter as she stopped the witness to ask what he had said and how to spell it. He had said a word from medical terminology about his condition after he had been stabbed, and the word was pneumothorax, meaning collapsed lung. She asked him to spell it. I remember that clearly, because in court you have to get every word verbatim and can't just let go of what you didn't understand. In cart captioning, however, you can just put indistinct in the notes to indicate that you didn't understand what they said. Or you put whatever you heard that sounds similar and try to figure it out later on in post-production what they meant. But you never really interrupt the instructor during lecture. If the student doesn't understand what's in the transcript, he or she can also ask the professor later on during office hours or after class. Number 2, verbatim versus real-time. Court reporting is producing a verbatim record, though it doesn't have to be real-time. Cart is the inverse. It is not verbatim, although it can be close, but it does have to be real-time. Because of this, court reporting usually gets a few weeks to produce a transcript, and the post-production involves scopists and proofreaders. But cart providers have only 24 hours to turn in their transcripts. There is something called a daily for court reporters, wherein they have to turn in the verbatim transcript the next morning after the job. It's an expedited order and pays a higher rate, but it means that the court reporter is probably a CRR and has really clean real-time writing, so that cleaning up overnight doesn't mean staying up all night. But I've heard of court reporters who have stayed up into the wee hours of morning or all night to produce transcripts. This doesn't happen in cart captioning, I don't think. We don't stay up all night. Number 3, interacting with people in the room. Court reporters have to interact with attorneys in the room a little bit. They are asked to mark the exhibits, to read back the record, and to record orders for transcripts on the record. Cart captioners are pretty much left alone and not really talked to in class. Number 4, certification is needed for court reporting, but not necessarily for cart. Getting certification is necessary in many states for court reporting, but is not necessary for cart. However, this doesn't mean that agencies won't give you their own tests, which can be much harder than the NCRA tests for cart captioning. I have been tested using material from a real hour-long lecture for an agency that I applied to on board with to prove that I could produce real-time to their satisfaction at an accuracy rate they approve of. Then there are agencies and schools that just trust you have done this work before and give you a cart captioning job without asking you to show proof of certification. Number 5, storage of the record. Court reporters have hard drives where they keep their files for many years and have to be organized enough to produce that transcript if it's requested years after the actual job. Cart providers are sometimes asked by certain clients to delete their files right after the job for confidentiality. Other times, we keep our files a year or two and then delete everything. A good laptop computer with plenty of storage is enough, and no external hard drive is needed for cart captioning. Number 6, differences in pay and taxes. Cart captioning pays hourly. You know exactly how much your pay will be after the job ends. And you put on your timesheet the number of hours, adding overtime minutes if applicable, billed to the invoice. Court reporters get paid appearance fees for showing up to a job. It's usually something like an hourly rate with a 3-hour minimum, a half-day rate, or a whole-day rate. And then they get paid per page of transcript that is produced in post-production scoping and proofreading. They get paid in advance for a job when it's ordered, but then they produce the job and find out there are more pages than the initial estimate and have to recalibrate the price in an invoice to the client. There's way more paperwork for a court reporter because they have to keep track of payments to scopists and proofreaders for tax deduction later on. And they also have to send 1099-NECs to their scopists and proofreaders who make more than $600 a year helping them. Number 7, transcript production. Cart captioners have to insert anything in the environment that cannot be heard by their deaf clients. They have parentheticals that would never go in a court transcript. For example, board work. When they hear the instructor writing on the board, the student doesn't necessarily hear that, and it's good to alert the student to look up at the board by putting board work. You could put several voices at once when it's disrupting the ability of the captioner to get all the words. Also, things like laughing, music, etc. goes into the transcript. Court reporters also have situations in their transcripts that never come up in cart captioning. For instance, they may have lawyers who ask for information to be inserted later on into the transcript, and they have a parenthetical that says information requested. Number 8, scopists and proofreaders. Court reporters may hire scopists and proofreaders, but cart captioners usually do their own work. There's no time to hire anybody. You only have 24 hours to turn in your transcript. So it's best they clean up their transcripts after the lecture and turn it in ASAP. Notary license. Number 9, notary license. Court reporters get notary licenses to be able to swear in the witness at depositions. Cart providers don't need notary licenses, although if they want a good side gig, they can become a notary on the side, which I know of one cart provider who does that. Number 10, transcript formatting. Court reporters and cart providers have very different transcript formatting. Court reporters have to use pleading paper format and have a page at the beginning with all the addresses and names of people who appeared at the deposition. They also have a certification page where they sign off on the accuracy of the record and an index at the end of the transcript providers have a variety of ways to produce a transcript depending on the agency's preference. Sometimes you don't have to do anything, and the agency will just pull the transcript from the real-time produced in the stream text software. Other agencies want you to email the ASCII file to the student, whose email they'll give to you, and you have to have a blurb at the beginning of the transcript to show who, what, where, when, to identify that transcript. I usually do something like the following. This is the calculus class, CALC 1A, with professor's name on April 1, 2026, for student's name at university name, remotely captioned by Carolyn via agency name. And that's the header for the file that I use, unless there's a different header or transcript template that the company wants me to use. Some companies want you to put your transcript into a template format that they have and email it to the client. Sometimes there are agencies that want you to upload the file to their portal. You have to keep organized, knowing which agency wants the transcript turned in which way, to not get mixed up and turn it in wrongly. CART transcripts also usually have a blurb in the header of the file that says something to the effect of, CART is not necessarily verbatim, but is provided for communication access. Number 11, emotions. In CART captioning, you experience mostly positive emotions, except when a speaker speaks like a motor mouth who's too fast, and you're stressed out about that. But otherwise, the information is interesting and not usually stressful. In court reporting, however, it's an adversarial environment where you have to have nerves of steel to not be affected by attorneys who might be yelling at each other. I've read comments and posts from court reporters who say they feel anxious on the job. I also remember reading some posts about court reporters who have had nightmares. Number 12, CART for court. There are jobs where the CART captioning happens in courts, and then it's an interesting situation where you have to provide communication access, but not a verbatim record of the proceedings. I don't know if a transcript is provided to the client or not in this case, but if it is, you have to be careful that it is not mistaken for a court transcript. If you can think of any other ways that CART captioning differs from court reporting, please put them in the comment section. Okay, so those are some differences between court reporting and CART captioning. Which one interests you more?